arts or people who tend to fall into that category, I absolutely think that they grasp
So, how did we want to start this? Did we want to just kind of talk about some movie news at the top? Whatever the fuck kind of
Movie
what
news.
we're hearing. And we were talking about the Oscars earlier, me and John, a little bit. I don't know if you guys had heard about sort of that bidding war over the guy who directed Barbarian, but that shit was pretty fucking crazy.
Barbarian.
You didn't watch Barbarian last year?
No.
Yeah, that movie was fucking crazy. You gotta check that one out. It's a horror movie.
Ugh.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
With Justin Long.
yeah. The movie was really, really good.
No, I've been listening to like people in the industry talking about the Andrea Riseborough thing. Have you all heard about all that?
Yeah, we talked about that for a second, but we should
Okay.
talk about that too.
Yeah, Scott's in the Twitter world, so he probably knows a lot more than I do.
God, that sounded like a slur. um
Scott's a twit.
Stop. No, I mean, I just think it's like so fascinating how like there's all these rules that people don't know about campaigning, and people don't even think about it being a campaign. Like, when people are getting mad about things getting snubbed or things not getting nominated or getting attention, like there's so much, like behind the scenes bullshit that goes into even just like being on the radar to be nominated for Academy Awards. And there's so much money involved in it. And so there's so many rules that the Academy has for like an ethical and like fair campaign. And so all of these like, celebrities just like tweeting out to see this movie and to and kind of like hyping up Andrea. It's so funny because it's like that is a totally free thing for them to do, but I guess they just weren't really thinking about the power that they wielded in doing that. And so I guess they kind of breached some rules about how campaigns are allowed to go, but I think they're just going to let it fly because it's like they haven't really thought about social media and how all of that can be wielded for stuff like this. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Did you guys even watch this movie?
No, bro, I didn't hear about it until I started seeing people talk about it.
Yeah,
No,
I literally didn't even know it existed until the noms came out.
Yeah, it had like a
until
2 minute
Titanic's Francis Fisher was telling everybody to watch it.
Titanics. What else are they in? Is that their claim to fame? You said
Well, no, it's
Francis Ticker?
Francis Fisher. Yeah, I think she plays like Kate Winslet's mom in the movie, but she also is in Watchmen, the HBO series. She plays the wife of the sheriff that gets killed, the redhead.
Oh, word.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know. I just remembered the day that I saw Sarah Paulson share this screenshot of the film, and I saw her like message about it, and then I saw other people sharing, and it was like the exact same words, and I was like, this is so corny, you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of the thing too, right? Because I'm not sure what the rules say specifically, but I can't help but feel some sort of respect for it because it was done so grassroots, like you're saying. Like uh it didn't feel like it was necessarily a huge marketing push, but at the end of the day, it definitely was a marketing push.
Yeah,
Um,
because the people that did it are fucking scumbags.
yeah. I mean, and yeah, like we were talking about earlier, like it is just Hollywood elite all kind of going for it at the same time in a coordinated effort. But I saw her in Possessor. I was trying to remember what movie I saw her in. She's a incredible actress. I haven't seen For Leslie yet, but I'm excited to. I just didn't know the movie fucking existed.
Yeah. Well, it's like she's so transformative, and you just don't really. I think she's not really on anyone's radar, and I think too, it's like I don't really know how much she's actually involved with all of this. Like, she doesn't really seem awards thirsty in the kind of like proper sense that some people do. So I
No,
Well,
don't
I
know.
mean, Kwame, didn't we watch Oblivion together?
is that the
The one with Tom Cruise with M83 doing the score?
I don't think so. I
She's
keep
in
thinking
that
of Prometheus.
too.
She's in that too.
Yeah, and she's in Birdman.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is
word.
like totally sidebar, but you just mentioned Oblivion, and I just saw a picture on Twitter today of this like dude on the red carpet of Oblivion when they like premiered in like Ireland or some crazy place. And he was just his whole job that night was to follow Tom Cruise around with a space heater on the red carpet because it was so cool.
Oh my god.
That's power Scientology, baby.
Where's the grassroots campaign to get that PA a real job?
No, another PA to follow him around with a space heater. He's
There
got
is
to
no
bind to the
grass
family.
because it's Ireland. They don't have grass, right?
No,
Is
that's
that
like all grass, John.
Whatever, dude. That's Greenland.
Oh
shit.
man. Well, also it
Uh,
was crazy too,
Scott,
like finding out that a lot of the rules for the campaigning for Oscars were created because of all of the like really crazy bullish tactics that like Harvey Weinstein and Miramax were utilizing.
Like what? What were they doing?
what?
Well, it's like um you can't have a luncheon with industry people unless it's attached to a screening because
Oh, you have to
like
make sure
during the
that they've
whole
seen the movie.
yeah, or else you're just kind of like schmoozing and there's no actual like validity to it. Not that there, but that's the thing, right? Like, not that there's validity to any of this anyway, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
all so subjective. I think it's just kind of like poking holes in the idea that these are, you know, like objective things to begin with. So,
Yeah. And I think that's kind of part of the illusion too, um, of me, which I think I'm like the perfect target audience for the Oscars, right? Because I get easily invested in the like sort of the mythology surrounding it. So it's like I have my favorites, like people that I've been inspired by through the years. So I get attached to the idea of like, oh man, when is Scorsese gonna get it? It's like I want to see the stuff that I want to see preserved, awarded. But at the end of the day, it's like the fact that I want that through some sort of fucking vessel that's archaic and kind of
Rigged.
corrupt is yeah, it's kind of shallow at the end of the day. I don't know.
yeah, I think just like, um, it's exciting to see that she's nominated because it's this tiny movie with no marketing budget, but it's not exciting because it kind of reveals that like in some way like this all has to do with power and like all of those actresses kind of getting her to that place. It just kind of shows that like they can do that with whoever they want to and why they didn't do that with you
Any
know
number of people.
any number of people.
Yeah.
Is Yeah, it's like exciting in one way and then totally like bleak in the other way.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, did any of the women talking actresses get nommed for
No.
either supporting or lead?
Oh no,
No.
I thought somebody did get nominated for lead from Women Talking. Maybe
I don't
not.
think
No, because
so.
it's Kate, it's Anna, it's Andrea,
It's
it's
Homegirl from Everywhere.
Michelle Yeoh,
Yeah, Michelle Yeoh.
and that's it, right? Just four?
I thought it was 5. No, Angela
Well,
Bassett
I
got
mean,
supporting.
the women talking women got SAG Award ensemble nomination, which I feel like is where they fit.
Where's that? That's gonna be truly not. Yeah,
Was there any
acknowledged there.
standouts in that movie, Scott? I asked Emily, but she didn't really have a good answer.
I think, you know, people are saying Rooney Mara, which is fair. Claire
I mean, she's
Foy,
she's a darling though.
yeah, Claire Foy was like very. I just feel like all the performances were very Oscar baity, if that makes sense. Like I just
Yeah.
thought that
Even
whole
Jesse
like
Buckley?
who
Even Jesse Buckley?
um if I had to pick a favorite performance in that movie, it'd probably be hers.
But even she was Oscar baity?
I mean, the movie's about a bunch of women who were, very, very violently abused, and the characters themselves don't really feel like three-dimensional in a lot of ways. And Sarah Polley talked about how she wrote 6 different drafts of the film, each from different perspectives of the main characters. And I think in some way that was to show that they were three-dimensional, but to me it just shows that they were just like incredibly strong in their standpoint, and there was no like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just found the performances kind of like solipsistic. Like they were just very like they didn't feel human to me. It felt very much like a kind of otherworldly thing when it was like very, very real and based on a real thing. I think the performance we forgot to mention for Best Actress is Michelle Williams in The Fabelmans.
Yeah, Fabelmans, yeah. I mean, she had two movies that were in the conversation for a second. She said kind of got obliterated, though. It's a weird time. It's a really weird time for kind of like the slower dramas. Or I guess movies that are kind of engineered to be Oscar bait. And that's what kind of made Barbarian so fucking interesting. And I guess this whole bidding war is, it seems like a lot of the newer talent, or like the movies that Hollywood's willing to take a risk on, is horror for some reason. Maybe it's because
so easy to make them, dude, and it's so easy to make money.
I mean, it's easy to make them. It's easy to make money. Sure, like you have like Megan and shit, and like all the Amityville horror movies, like those all make a shit ton of money for real little. But I think the thing that we're seeing a lot of too is that you can say a lot with horror, and I think that a lot of big name directors are utilizing it. Like Ari Aster, I would have thought at this point he would have moved on to something else, but for some reason he still wants to kind of use that mold. I mean, Jordan Peele left comedy, which is, he was pretty honest with his comedy, but for some reason horror is where he kind of feels at home. And I don't know if that's kind of like forced on him industry wise. Like people are calling him like Hitchcock after one movie.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think we'll see horror kind of platformed in that way more as, like a lot of the reason that we're seeing things like Parasite win Best Picture and Bong Joon-ho win Best Director, and now we're seeing Triangle of Sadness nominated outside of the foreign language categories because they're expanding the body, right? So it's like the Oscars for so long has been so much about celebrating Hollywood and American movies.
Mm.
And now that we're seeing the body expand a little bit more, we're seeing like what's allowed in. Because I mean, Parasite is like not a horror movie, but like,
I mean, it was pretty.
Shit was kind of freaky.
It was kind of freaky.
What I mean? Like,
yeah.
I've never been so unsettled than when they go down in that basement for the first time, or when, so it's like, and like, yeah, like Ari Aster, and I got to see this Brandon Cronenberg joint.
Oh, Infinity Pool.
Infinity Pool.
Yeah, that movie looks fucking nutty. I loved Possessor, bro.
Scary.
But it's interesting that you said like expanding the idea of, just kind of expanding perspective. Because I mean, in the Sight and Sound greatest films thing, they put Twin Peaks: The Return on there, the HBO special. Like that's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's really good to see all of that.
Scott, do you think that they're expanding the body because they're actually broadening their horizons? Or do you think that they're expanding it because we've reached a point now where so many markets are so oversaturated that they would be remiss to not let one foreign film per se burst through in the same way as several years ago it reached the point where they would be fucking idiots if they didn't let like a black director or a black story break through and get into several categories? Like, is it honestly horizons being broadened, or is it just like we should probably choose a foreign film because so many countries have for so long been making the best movies in the world and we've been ignoring them?
Well, it's probably two
both.
things, right? Like, I mean, it's Hollywood, so nothing is honest, you know what I mean? But also, like, the Academy is made up of a lot of different people. And so I think that, like, there is a democratic element to it in some way. And, like, if you think about, like, things that would be traditionally considered Oscars movies, the moment that you allow even one parasite into that field, it
Yeah, you
almost
can't put
feels
that
like,
back in the bottle.
yeah, you can't put it back in the bottle. And like, if you compare Parasite to like 5 movies that are kind of samey in a way, it kind of like makes you think, okay, well, if there's this Parasite movie, what else is out there? And
Yeah.
so I think things like, for, Everything Everywhere All at Once is like made possible in some way because we're no longer like holding to the idea that Oscar worthy movies are about some dude who's damaged, who is struggling to change himself or succumb to his damage. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many more, even just like stories out there, not to mention like, you know, the way
Filmmaking.
the movie is made. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. S-
Um,
So the real question is, when do we consider Marvel movies to be cinema then? If that's the case. If we're
Wait, ask
willing
your
to
question
broaden.
again.
When
Ask
do
your question
we
again.
when do we include Marvel movies in the bracket of cinema then?
Well, it seems like the Oscars are teetering on that because, it seems like every year there's a new category that they're willing to nominate a Marvel movie into.
Yeah.
And this year it was best
Actress. Supporting
supporting.
actress, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Bro,
Last
that
year it was
shit.
like fucking visual effects or something,
Yeah, they got
you know.
costume last year. This shit's a fucking
The
it's a
thing is,
parody.
though, I get the feeling, even from people that are Marvel people that I know, I get the feeling that Marvel is kind of like, I don't know, losing its momentum probably isn't the right word because they have the next 15 years planned and probably funded already,
Mhm.
because they just make an obscene amount of money every single movie. But uh, I don't know, it seems like 3 years ago, to me, it seemed like Marvel was going to dominate forever. Box office, conversation, ideas. It seemed like Marvel was going to dominate forever, but now it seems like the tides are changing or something else. Well, I think like out of respect, they'll probably keep nominating Marvel just because out of the sheer amount of people that they're getting into movie theaters. But
Yeah.
like,
well, I've seen a lot of that fan base kind of turning on the whole ecosystem itself, whether it's for, totally like um insane reasons like they're too woke or whatever, or just kind of like the feeling that like the fan base is not being, cared for and carried through a long form narrative in the way that it used to, and that it's just kind of like a studio throwing out movies as cash grabs. I feel like I've seen, like you said, John, like the tide change on that. And I don't know if that means that people altogether stop going to see movies, or if they go, okay, well, if I'm not going to Marvel anymore, I heard about this Everything Everywhere All at Once thing, which kind of sounds like what happened because that movie like blew up. And I mean, we all watched the whole Get Out thing happen when we were in school. Like, it just feels like there have been 1 or 2 movies a year that have been really like breaking through the noise. Um,
Yeah.
and I
I
don't
mean
know
it
if the Oscars helps that, but it's good to see when you go to something to see it honored. So I see that side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Oscars just kind of represents like it should hopefully in the best case scenario just kind of be a reflection as to kind of like how the market's kind of working a little bit. Like we should always find like the one or two indie movies that sneak through there. But I think you guys are right when you say that like you can see momentum from the Marvel movies start of shifting a little bit outside the Oscars, but especially with Pixar. Like Pixar has been really fucking slouching. Like they were winning mad Oscars for a minute there, but now they're barely getting nominated at this point. Like the animated field this year was crazy fucking stacked. And the potential movies that one or two Pixar movies could have had was pretty low, honestly. And I think Marvel could be next before they even really got settled.
yeah, because Pixar, that's like a household name at this point.
Hmm. I mean, they were the underdog for a minute, but they became, part of the industry, just like everything else that's allowed to exist for that long.
All
Did
I
you
want to
guys
know,
watch Everything Everywhere in theaters?
yeah.
Yeah, I watched in theaters. Yeah.
Did you guys have like uh I mean, you mentioned Get Out, Scott. I know when Kwame and I and everyone else that went to go see Get Out, the theater experience was as notable as the movie itself. Did you guys have a theater experience with Everything Everywhere All at Once, or was it
Oh,
just like
100%. Yeah.
really?
Yeah, because I mean, like everybody there had heard about it
Oh
and was like,
yeah.
let's go to this thing. And so it was a bunch of people that otherwise maybe wouldn't have stumbled into that movie, but were there because they heard about it from other people who had.
Yeah. That's fair. I think I saw it a little bit earlier in that cycle. I think that Top Gun was definitely a little bit more of a cinematic experience, but I think it was mostly older people in there that were hyped as fuck for it. But I think with everything ever all at once, I think that was definitely like looking at that grassroots campaign versus the grassroots campaign that kind of that too Leslie had, at least initially with everything everywhere all at once, because I feel like a couple people saw it on Twitter and it became like a pretty big mob really quickly that got people to go see that movie again. And now obviously the industry's got a hold of it and they're kind of touting it around. But before, it kind of felt like it was kind of a secret success story for a minute. I feel like I didn't see a lot of people talking about it up until maybe the past couple months.
Hmm.
Maybe I misread that though. I don't know.
Well, I know the people at the Bell Court here were saying pretty much immediately, while Everything Everywhere was still in its initial theater run, because they re-released it in theaters now
Mm-hmm.
because of how well it did at the Oscars. But on the initial theater run, I heard people at the Belcourt talking about how ticket sales specifically for that movie were unprecedented, even just with them. And I know
Yeah.
that like the year prior, the Anthony Bourdain documentary Roadrunner had done that, had broken all of the Belcourt's records, which if you guys didn't see that and even have a remote interest in Anthony Bourdain, it's an incredible documentary.
Mm.
Uh, and the year before, or several years before that, it was Moonlight that had broken all the records because of how good it was. But Everything Everywhere for me was like immediately a sensation. Like I saw it the week it came out, and I felt like I was seeing it late.
I mean, I think the thing with the Belcourt too is that they kind of just have a really good selection there. I'm trying to remember if I saw it at a Regal or not. Because I mean, that might have just been one of the only places you could catch it in Nashville. Was it playing at the big theaters too?
No,
Yeah, that might have been why. Because I mean, it must have been big online before it started showing. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
mean,
know they did
I
a.
saw it at AMC because like
You saw it at
that movie
AMC.
didn't. Yeah, that movie didn't play in like the quote unquote like independent art house theaters here because you know, for all intents and purposes, like it isn't an art house film. It's just like in Nashville, it's going to play at the Belcourt because it's artier than like the blockbuster movie. But yeah, I saw it at AMC and it was like filled with people. It was
Mm,
packed and it was loud and really boisterous and really fun.
yeah. I
I'm
mean, it's
glad
it's
that it wasn't at an art house theater where it would have been, like a bunch of quite serious people trying to like find something about it that was, artful and not just like enjoying themselves, which there are many things in that movie to find artful, but it's ultimately like just a fun time, I think.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I just want to, I need to know if they're planning to have Will Smith slap Chris Rock again at the Oscars. 'Cause I think that would be so fucking funny.
Yeah, I think this time, they can really swing from the fences. They know that Chris Rock can really take one. They might as well really unload this time if they're gonna plan
They should
something.
have Will Smith descend from the top of the theater on a zip line down to the stage.
Just really telegraph that slap coming in.
Yeah.
They need something. They need something because they always have something kind of planned halfway through to try to bring in more viewers. But I don't know if they were ready for Big Willie to come through and do him like that though. Like that was a little out of character for Will Smith.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well let's get into these picks, these choices.
Which one do I do first? I think I watched Ahed's Knee most recently.
What did you think of it? Because like that was a movie that John and I think kind of like at the same like parallel at the same time were experiencing, and I remember us both loving it at like on Jump, you know, like. And I saw it in March. I mean, I know it was like part of the kind of like last year, quote unquote, award cycle, but I saw it, you know.
In
God,
20,
but how did
20 yeah.
how did you hear about it? Because I watched Synonyms, which
Yeah.
is his previous film, and absolutely loved it and watched everything he made afterward.
I think I
And
just remember seeing a trailer for it.
cause yeah, I was just so surprised when I realized that you hadn't seen Synonyms because that film also blew my mind, and that is why I was stoked for Ahed's Knee. And then seeing that Ahed's Knee was about a filmmaker, I was like, oh god, yeah, it's also meta. Like, sign me up, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think I saw a trailer for it at one of the theaters that I go to, and I just thought it looks good, and so I went. And I think that I told you about it, and you were like, "That's Nadav Lapid," and yada yada blah blah blah, and then from there. But Kwame, so you had heard of it, you just hadn't seen it, or no?
No, y'all put me onto that one. I'd never heard of it up until
Okay, well then, what did you think?
we
Because
started talking about it.
I'm so interested to hear like because we just like kind of were back and forth at one another about it for so long. So what did you think? I want to hear your like just kind of like raw take.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as like raw takes are concerned, I am not familiar with any of this dude's work. So I mean, the fact that y'all were able to like pick up the fact that it was gonna be meta, like before even going into it, I didn't have that preface at all, and I didn't even realize that it was that personal up until maybe halfway through the movie. And I think that was the main thing too. I was super unattracted to this movie for like maybe the first 20 minutes. Like it felt like the cinematography didn't match the tone of what they were going for. Like especially the scene where he was dancing. It felt like it was out of step and out of rhythm with him. But then eventually it locks in. Maybe after the scene where you see the mother and the kid on the bike, it starts to sort of find its rhythm a little bit. And it was around that time that you start to notice, oh, this is all going to be played out through just one single day. So and then after that, I could start to feel almost like the rhythm of a day. So it kind of starts a little bit more rushed, and then it kind of evens a little bit. So I started to make a little bit more sense to me. So like, all right, cool. Setting, I feel it. I'm in the desert. It feels dry. Got it. I'm with it. And then I really started to get invested once he's in the van with the guy and they're listening to Bill Withers.
And the cashews.
Yeah, the cashews. Yeah, right. So he denies him first, but then once he starts to get comfortable, he starts eating the cashews. And then it's like, oh, shit. I'm almost starting to kind of relate to this dude, even though he's such a piece of shit, really. Like, I'm starting to kind of relate to him almost just solely based off feeling. I'm starting to get more comfortable. He's starting to get more comfortable. The cinematography starts to feel more comfortable. We almost even get a glimpse into this guy's head while he's dancing at home with his wife, where we know more about him than we do our main character.
What an incredible sequence, man.
Yeah, I thought that was really solid. Obviously shit starts to unfold, right? We get to the end, and it feels really earned. I feel like by the end of it.
It feels really what you cut out.
Oh, it felt really earned. Felt really earned to me.
Mm.
The stakes, I feel like, reached it. I feel like as an audience member, I felt like I was almost in the mob as well. Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to figure out who I was, because I mean, I'm always, especially off a first watch. I haven't been able to watch this a second time yet. Our first watch, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, so what's the director's intended perspective for me to have, as far as like first person, third person? Like, am I supposed to be like more of an omnipotent person, or, you know, so what's their desired intent, and then like what am I naturally kind of feeling into? Like, what character am I kind of attaching myself to? Am I just kind of, is everybody just kind of voids that the director's just kind of working through what's going on? And this movie definitely almost, yeah, I definitely felt like I was kind of just like a ghost floating around while everything was happening. I felt like a foreigner in the area. And I think that was kind of the director's intent. It felt like it was just kind of like a chaotic day in all of their lives. It kind of reminded me of High Noon. I forgot who directed High Noon, but just like this one specific day that we get to spend with these people that results in chaos, and then we just kind of move on a little bit. I don't know. So I'm still kind of processing that one. But
Yeah, there's something like super like parabolistic about it. Like this
yeah,
person who, seems a bit like aware of his own like bullshit,
yeah,
and he goes into the desert and is put through this like torrential thing, and then is supposed to come out of it different.
mm-hmm.
Um, that kind of like blueprint, I think, really worked for this, like you said at the beginning, this kind of like frenetic and if a bit like schizoid kind of like visual thing, to kind of
Yeah,
end up in this very like traditional stoic almost confrontation between this person who um he's an artist. It's like he, in some way, he doesn't like think about the kind of real world implications of a lot of things that he's doing because he doesn't
mm-hmm.
have to. And then he's confronted by this person who, like, I think really is in some way, just a decent person, and is just caught up in this thing that, in some way she knows is bad too. Um, and they're both kind of meeting one another in this place on this cliffside. And um, like you said, I think the whole thing kind of like, I think it starts unraveled and then it kind of becomes tied up, and neatly tied at the end.
Yeah.
You think it's neat?
I think it's
I mean,
pretty.
at the
I
end of
mean,
it, yeah, I think so.
it's
Dude, I
neat.
think
As neat
I
as that could have gone, I guess.
I I rewatched it before we talked, and I actually rewatched the end specifically earlier today,
Mm.
and I love the film so much, but it is such a mess in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And uh I really can't figure out if that was intended or if it just got out of his hands, because with synonyms there were so many moments where I was like, uh this is the most brilliant director working that I've ever seen, and I've never even heard of him. And uh his most famous film, called The Kindergarten Teacher, was
Yeah.
remade in English with, I think, Naomi Watts. I can't remember. Um, but that film is incredible, and it's so structured and pristine and razor sharp. And it's almost like he was reaching to make a Hanukkah film, like fucking pinpoint accuracy
Yeah.
with Kindergarten Teacher, and then Synonyms happens, and it's this like frenetic energy. that he just leaned into even more for Ahed's knee. And I love it so much. Like when he's dancing through the desert and the camera is doing God knows what, like looking everywhere. Uh, I love it, but I'm also like, what is did this film like slip through your fingers, but you found a way to at least finish it and release it?
Nah,
Or
dude, I don't think that it. I don't. I hear what you're saying because like I think the moment that I feel the most um not with him is when he's laying on the couch with the girl.
that's the
And
most grounded time for me.
but when the camera's like looking all over the place.
Oh, when he
No,
seems
that
like he's almost like okay. So for me, that moment almost made it, and it especially felt the case too. Um, at the end, where he's almost, it's almost
he's
like an objectification.
disassociating.
Yeah, like he knows that she is literally just the vessel that he's going to kind of use to tell this story later. But yeah, it kind of feels like he's not really listening to what she's saying. Which for me, the moment that kind of took me out was when he was in the desert because it felt like he was immediately then in turn really attached to what she was saying because he immediately went out to this giant fucking lake out in the middle of nowhere. I forgot.
And jumps into the water after
With all
taking
the
his
dead
coat
air.
off.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It was something about that scene in the desert up until the moment where he got in the car that felt off. But I don't know. The scene where he was looking outside back and forth. Um it felt like he was just trying to ignore what she was saying and was trying to almost escape from the conversation. Um
You're
a little
talking about
bit.
when he's dancing or when they leave the screening of his film and they're walking up on top of the mountain.
Where they're laying on the couch together
I
at the
think
Gotcha,
beginning
gotcha,
when he
gotcha.
when he first meets her. Yeah. But if that's the case, yeah, it doesn't really connect with
And no, I mean,
the scene immediately after that.
no matter what, though, I think the film is brilliant,
Yeah, I mean, I
and
don't think.
It also
I
just has it has an energy to it that I just don't. And
I'm
it's like
not getting from
sexy,
anyone
man.
else.
Yeah, it's so sexy. I mean, even just like that the beginning shot of like the like fucking babe on the motorcycle. I was just like, it's like it was like the best parts of Titan were
Yeah,
like were like in that movie. Just the kind of like energy of this like maybe kind of like a total asshole who was just like moving through this very like arid space and kind of making it teem with life in a way. I don't. And I do love that that moment when him and the woman leave the screening and they go up on top of the mountain and he's kind of like and he's recording her and she doesn't know it and he's like telling her this story. There was something so like um uh it felt like Beckett. It felt like a Beckett play kind of like it just like zoomed in on his mouth and he was whispering and I don't know. I loved every element of that movie.
what
It.
made you choose it, though?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I don't I don't know. I think in some way it's because um
You hated Top Gun?
dude, I loved Top Gun. Top Gun was a
Yeah.
fun time.
Same.
Um I just it's singular. Like there's something about it that I'm like I've never seen anything like that movie. Um I loved that central performance and I really loved the co-star as well. I thought she was really I think she walked that fine line of like I think she got you on her side. Like I think you're almost
She did.
immediately on her side, even though you're like you're working for a monstrous like organization and doing monstrous things.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
And she's not being entirely truthful as well, right?
Right.
Especially
yeah,
as the dude that I didn't necessarily, you know, fuck with. I don't really know how you guys felt about the character necessarily in general. Like I think that he was a well like applied character, but as far as like the dude himself, like he's not
yeah,
really
he's a
somebody.
prick.
Yeah, he's kind of just like a shitter, right? Um, I think that also worked well for
Yeah.
getting
Well,
us
that
to.
moment when he's at the screening and he gets on like a dating app and he's like, "I'm here premiering a film. I'm a director." Like he's just like so like unabashedly like,
And he even goes, I'm actually pretty famous.
yeah, yeah.
Like he types that out in a message.
um, and then, I mean, I loved all of the kind of like I love the cutaway to the military people, like when all of the guys are like, pretending to kill themselves
Mhm.
um and I just do think it has so much heart, especially at the end when her little sister is like, when she goes up to him and
Tells him that he's good.
yeah, I think there's just something about it that felt very like spiritual in a way that didn't feel directed at God but at man in a way that I thought was so beautiful,
Mhm.
and it just felt really really big to me, and really gutsy, and didn't feel pandering. Like I think it was aware that it was like doing a lot of risky things, but it didn't really care. So I just loved
Yeah,
the energy of the whole thing. So
it definitely felt aware that it was going to piss some people off. And I'm not sure what the reception of it was, but it definitely felt like it knew that it was gonna that it was doing some risky shit for sure.
Which we love, man, because like cancel culture and all of the fucking adjacent shit to that is, I feel like it's just taking everyone's guts away. Like nobody's taking any risks.
I don't know if it's necessarily cancel culture as much as I think a lot of writers. I think we've widened, like we said before, we've widened a lot of the gap. A lot of the barriers to entry for film have kind of dropped off. And I think a lot of the voices that we have are just a lot of young voices that are still trying to find their voice at the moment. So I'm excited to see what sort of Gen Z does once they sort of figure their shit out a little bit. As far as the older generation, I mean, there's no excuse, I don't really think, for not doing something risky, especially when you have some of our oldest directors taking some of their biggest fucking swings. Like the fact that Francis Ford Coppola is finally doing his fucking movie, like that's crazy.
Megalopolis.
Yeah, like as much as I don't give a shit about Avatar 2, like there's no way I can't like still feel warm thinking about the fact that movie did well, because it definitely shouldn't have. It definitely should not have done well, just based on the fact that nobody really cared about it. But at the end of the day, everybody went to go see it, you know, because that's just the power of cinema, baby.
Well, speaking of taking chances and like older directors taking their biggest swings, I feel like
man,
Vortex is a
yeah,
fucking huge example of that because Gaspar has built his reputation on making a certain kind of movie, and
Truly,
Vortex was not that.
no, no, Vortex was not that at all. I absolutely fucking. I mean, I adore Gasper's work in general, and so much of it is because I I feel like it's just like really really fucking challenging shit. I think that it appeals to like
Always.
the yeah. I think it appeals to kind of like the teenager in me that was always like, "Oh man, everybody's so fucking soft. They can't even fucking deal with these movies." But every single time I watch a Gasper movie, it puts me on my ass. Like all of those movies are too much. And I feel like he knows they're too much. Like that's kind of the appeal about him is that he is. I feel like we're watching a man search for something, and I think that I think that he did really really well with with the climax. I think the climax is probably still his best movie, just as far as like a technical performance. But there's just something so pure about Vortex that speaks to sort of the fragility of humanity, the search for meaning, sort of like this desire to be present, to want your partner to be present. It's just, it's so fucking, it's heavy. And I love movies like this. I love movies like Tar, movies in which you can like sort of pick a thing that this movie's about this. But it's like at the end of the day, it's too human to sort of just relegate it to one thing that it's about. Like this movie truly was just about a process of being a human and coming to terms with that. And there's just this great line that Stefan says to his son at the end, where it's like, I mean, is grandma coming back with us? And he's like, no, I mean, home is for the living. And that shit fucking shook me to my core for fucking weeks after that, especially coming out of COVID. Because I mean, this feels like such a post-COVID movie. Yeah, and that last 5 minutes just fucked me up. We're just going through the apartment, and we watch as it slowly becomes as decayed as they are, and eventually it's just gone. We move on, and yeah, on to being a human again, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I had this really crazy experience with it because I pressed play on the movie the moment I sat down on the plane to fly home to Nashville, and the movie ended as we were landing, and it felt like this very like metaphoric kind of thing because, you know, we're not saying about this movie that that Gasper does this like very fascinating, to my understanding of like what exists out there, new thing where he basically just like split screens the entire thing. And so, you know, you're watching these two people wake up in bed together, and then you're watching one of them get up and go make tea and read the paper a little bit and go to the bathroom while the other one's still in bed, but you're seeing both of these things happen. And so I had this feeling as I was watching it that the entire thing was about how much distance there is between people that were like very, very intimately close to, and how he used the form itself as a way to express that rather than like, you know, kind of shine a light on that in the narrative in any explicit way. And so as I was like flying thousands of miles away from what I consider home now, I was like just feeling that distance between those two characters in that first like just like 10-15 minute sequence where you're just watching the wife have her day and then go and she gets lost and her husband's concerned and terrified for her. I found it so evocative, and you know, John, you're going to talk about Bardo, and I think all of these movies, they're directors who are like wrestling with what it means to kind of like to exemplify your life through cinema and using that form as a way to like understand yourself and the world around you. And I thought Gasper's was so like so sly and so like interesting because it didn't overwhelm the senses in any way. It was just kind of like this formal thing that you'd forget about watching movies all the time. But what if all of a sudden you just kind of split it down the middle and you're seeing maybe sometimes the same exact physical space scene, but you're watching it be bifurcated. And I just thought that was so effective, and I really, really loved it.
That was the true brilliance of the movie, in my opinion, because technically the way he introduces the split screen while they're in bed baffles me, just technically on a technical standpoint. And but the first time that you see that while we're in split screen for the rest of the movie, the first time that you see a scene happen that's happening simultaneously with what is obviously two separate cameras running, and you see the seam being broken or reached across by one or the other partner, I mean, that is what like...
Oh, it's brilliantly coordinated. It's fucking crazy.
I mean, Gaspar has never been disappointing on a technical standpoint ever since Irreversible.
Yeah.
And like every movie he makes is a technical innovation, in my opinion. And even like upon himself, he just continues innovating. And with Vortex, it was, you know, respectively a step backwards because Climax was sensually overwhelming.
Yeah.
And Vortex is this like slow, long, thoughtful, extremely intentional film that almost feels like a nightmare if you know what Gaspar's work is, because you're like, this dude made this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Kwame, you specifically, because you chose this film. I don't know if you looked into the real world around it, but Gaspar had like this crazy stroke, and right, and he like got out of the hospital for the stroke right before COVID hit Europe.
Oh shit.
And so he was like, he went from one kind of quarantine in the hospital to the other. And, you know, I watched some interview, I think it was with that guy from the Lincoln Film Center, but over Zoom when they were doing that, about Vortex. And Gaspar just talks about how, you know, he almost died, and because of that he got sober, and then he made Vortex, which is so apparent because of the pacing of the film itself, but also like Gaspar is still so incredibly present in that film.
Yeah.
And it's like so, it's so unsettling how quiet and still that film is coming from that man, you know? Like
Yeah.
that's all I could think about was like, this dude made Irreversible.
Which is such a
Now he's
happy
making
film,
this.
man.
Mhm.
Dude,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, and fucking Dario Argento
I
was
know, like,
so
what?
good. I
He
was
fucking
like,
killed it.
wait, what?
Cuz like there's like you could see in both of them so much that like they were reaching for, that they were trying to say in the moment. Like there was so much subtextually happening, but it felt like there were layers and layers of it. Like the scene where they're at the table, it's him, Stefan, the mother, and the little boy, I think it's Kiki.
Yeah, Kiki.
Uh Kiki's just smashing the toys on the table, and they're trying to have this
Oh my
conversation with
God.
this woman, and it's like that scene was fucking heartbreaking shit.
Oh my
It's
God.
it's insane. But Dario is like he's in like three different places. He's in three different places at once. We know that he's thinking about this woman he just left a message to. We know that he's almost pretending to talk to his wife, but wants Stefan to know that he's present, but also just trying to like keep himself in check so he doesn't explode on Kiki as well, because he knows if he explodes on Kiki, it's not really going to be because Kiki's upset, but because it's going to be a problem with the mother there as well. But us as the audience, we know that the mother is like kind of low-key plotting to kill the father at this point too. So it's just like all of this subtextual energy that's happening during the scene of things that we know, but these characters are just battling in front of us. It's really like it's toxic. It's like there's nothing but empathy for all the characters involved, and just like as a bystander, it's like you want. It almost feels like you're kind of a documentarian. I feel like Gasper always does a really good job of making you feel voyeuristic in a
Uh-huh.
scene.
100%. Well, and
Um,
like the very end kind of when it just, you're kind of just zooming out on all of the kind of basically coffins that we're all in. I
yeah,
just like, um, yeah, it was so, it was like tender in a way, but also so bleak and, uh,
Yeah. Great fucking movie. Loved it.
Kwame, is there another movie that film makes you think of?
I mean, I think Scott nailed the comparison between all three of these movies as far as directors. They all feel very meta. They're all the filmmakers who
It's all the rage now.
it kind of is though. But they all feel meditative, and I really, for me recently, I've been really attracted to the idea of sort of our older masters of film getting comfortable with the form, and then sort of looking at their own mortality, looking at their own legacy, and then sort of what it is that they're thinking. So it's like you got, like we were talking about earlier with Coppola and in his new movie, but I was thinking a lot about Irishman. I was thinking a lot about Agnes Varda movies. But I think Shame is probably one of the movies that it reminded me of a lot
The
as
Steve
well.
McQueen movie?
Yeah,
What?
I know. I don't know. It's something about how small it is and how contained everything is, and how on the verge of ruin everything is. The battling with addiction. We see a lot with Father and Stefan. The sort of aimlessness, even probably a little bit of Inside Llewyn Davis too. It almost feels the sadness feels biblical, but the characters feel very human. They almost feel like they're pawns in something. You know what I mean? Yeah, very cosmic energy with those movies.
Interesting. I was not expecting you to mention any of those movies.
Any of those movies? Yeah. I mean, what did it remind you of anything?
I mean,
I got
I got like Ozu vibes just from like watching a couple exist. You know how domestic the film was,
Mm.
yeah.
but uh, psychologically beyond that, uh, it almost felt like a Lars movie to me,
A little bit, yeah.
like Breaking the Waves or Dancer in the Dark or something like these double like ultra tortured characters that aren't given the space on screen to express their torture on purpose, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're given that torture from their space. I specifically remember I can't remember what it is in Vortex, but I think there's one scene where Dario is sitting on their couch, like in front of their TV. You know, there's shit everywhere in that apartment.
Yeah.
Like every like square inch of free space that makes even a little bit of sense is taken up by something. And there's he either grabs a book or a movie or a magazine or something off of a pile next to him, and then he, you know, flips through it or whatever, and then puts it on top of another pile underneath the couch. And I don't, there's like something about all of that stuff everywhere and the stillness of the film and the sparsity of the film that just remind me of like uh Dogma 95 movies, but
Mm-hmm.
reversed because you know those movies are so frenetic because they're so handheld and like low budget and video and it's like shitty and you have to lean in to get anything out of it. Whereas Vortex is like immaculately crafted, technically impressive, but very still. It's like it's like Gaspar inverted that energy,
And I,
and it's just so it was just so like my it felt like my mouth was just gaping that entire movie at so many different things.
it's funny you bring that up too, because a lot of those old Dogma movies that was almost like young dudes looking for an ideology to follow, right? Almost trying to like fill that god hole a little bit with almost like rules that they could follow that weren't really rules, but they were still rules. And a lot of the movies almost kind of like reflected a lot of that punk energy, but so much about and we kind of got a lot of that with at least on the surface with a lot of old Noe movies. But with this movie in particular, what makes it so strange, especially like feeling like the reverse of those movies, is that he still has a lot of that, like that dog in him from before, but it is more meditative. He is looking at actual death now. He doesn't feel like the respect for death that he had in those other movies, like Enter the Void and Irreversible, and sort of like the idea of what you lose with death, and sort of looking at, because especially Irreversible, you you start with all the trauma and then you end with sort of like this brightness. And if that movie was played in reverse, it would be one of the grimmest, most vile movies ever made. But due to his respect for death and for sort of the human condition, like it feels mean. It can feel mean spirited, but yeah, I don't know. Like there's something there. But in this one, I feel like if it just feels more refined because he's been able to look at real loss, like the stakes feel higher for him. And it's rare. It's rare that we see a director who's made who's relatively still young. Like he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. Like we wouldn't really not necessarily see somebody doing a film like this. It feels like this is a movie he maybe should have made in his 70s or something. You know, so it's at this really weird stage in his life. There's just kind of like all the stars aligning, I feel like.
Do you have a specific reason why you chose Vortex?
It was up there pretty high with Crimes of the Future. I loved Crimes of the Future for a lot of the same reasons. Vortex beat it out just on every technical level. It's immaculate. Tar was also phenomenal. That's probably my number 3. And then after that, really all the other movies were kind of close, kind of close for me. Loved the screenplay of Banshees, but something about it feels kind of like a movie that you just kind of you're just kind of happy that it exists. You're just kind of happy that you know that movie, that these two men had this experience and their stories kind of told. But past that, it didn't really do too much for me. But this one, I feel like it hit at just the right moment to kind of inspire me to kind of see more in film again. It's just kind of stuck with me more. Yeah.
Scott, you seemed to really love Vortex.
Yeah, I mean, I it honestly might have just been the experience I had watching it, but yeah, I think it almost feels like there's so much about all of those characters that we don't know. You know, like this is the thing that we're being shown about them. You know, the fact that we're not really made aware that what Stefan does is sell smack to people. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems like there's so much about these characters and their lives that have led them to where they are now, and like the dynamic that they exist in, that would be perfect fodder for like another type of movie. But the thing that we're zooming in on is the very, very end of of the three of them together. Um, and I think one thing from that film that I will never ever forget is the scene when he's having that heart attack and he's sitting at the edge of the bed,
Oh God.
and the his wife is just fast asleep and does not even know, and he just, you know, meanders through the house, um, in total darkness, in total, and surrounded by clutter from his life, and it's just, you know, um, alone. And I will never forget watching that.
Yeah. Something else that's interesting about it too is we don't really see a lot of older actors getting roles that are this complex
Yeah,
either. Like there's just not a lot of space for older actors in Hollywood in general.
Yeah.
But to play the film at their pace too, like we're moving with them at their pace. That's comfortable. We're forced to watch him have this entire heart attack. We're forced to watch the mother sort of just like in this daze, just kind of spin around and go through the same piles and go through her pills, and it just feels very domestic, but also in that voyeuristic view of like their domestic life. Yeah, we see how fucking separate they are, and just like the miles and distance that they have between each other, even though they're in the same apartment. Like how big his office feels. Like it looks like his office, he never has to leave. Like you have all these books, everything you want to do
yeah.
at the end of your life is right here. You don't even have to see that woman for the rest of your life, and it almost feels as if that is kind of how it played out, you know. And there's almost like a bleakness in the straightforwardness to it, that comes with allowing these characters to just kind of be and exist. And yeah, kind of connect with that to what Scott was saying. It kind of shows how little we do know about them, especially Stefan, and in the ways in which we do eventually get to know them. It makes it feel impactful, and yeah,
It reminds me a lot of Amor, again from Michael Haneke,
yeah, yeah. Because that's
because
another movie too. That yeah, go ahead.
that's like you know, I almost get the movies confused in my head when it comes to plot line, but it's really interesting to me that you mention, Kwame, about the movie Vortex moving at the actor's pace because they're older. Because I read an interview with Darius Kanji, who's the DP who shot Amor, deciding, which was a big decision for him because of his reputation and the development of the technology, but he decided to shoot Amor digitally instead of on film because of the age of the two leading actors. He wanted to be able to move quicker because he knew that their days would be shorter because of their energy levels.
Oh,
And uh, but Kanji also famously is like a single camera DP always, and that kind of ties into Bardo. But with Vortex, uh, it's obviously at least two cameras
mm,
running at the same time with actors that I would, in a very uh, general way consider the same age bracket as the actors in Amor, and uh, somehow Gaspar always shoots on film, and somehow he was able to capture the same kind of pacing or energy or atmosphere as Hanukkah was able to in Amor, at least when it comes to, the age of the actors, because there's so many scenes where they're walking from one room to the next that it like kind of takes a long time,
Yeah.
and it's because they're fucking old,
Yeah.
and in both movies you can see that, and I think that it's really interesting when a director, like you said, Kwame, isn't necessarily this far along in their life, is able to make a film about people that are farther along in their lives and
Mhm.
be truthful about it. I think that that's a really beautiful thing that cinema can do.
Yeah. Honestly. All right. Should we talk about Bardo?
Let's hear about it.
Let's do it. All right, John. Why'd you pick Bardo?
Because it was the only film I watched 3 times this year.
Oh, okay. That's a long ass movie too.
Yeah,
What's it like 247 or something? That's a long
yeah,
movie.
yeah. I've
Wait.
been an Iñárritu fan ever since I discovered Birdman and then worked backwards. Uh, I feel like I have Birdman pretty much memorized because for so long it was the only movie that I had downloaded on my laptop. So every time I would travel or had my computer and didn't have Wi-Fi, I would just watch Birdman. Uh, but Bardo, man, it's just like it's so uh it feels really spiritual to me. Kwame, you mentioned that with Ahed's knee. Bardo feels really spiritual to me, but it feels in a very Mexican way because Mexican authors for a long time have been really into magical realism.
Mm.
It's just like a part of Mexican culture at this point. And Bardo obviously is a lot of magical realism in a cinematic way. And I just found that really moving. Like being able to see that expressed and manifested in a cinematic way was really exciting to me. Uh, there were so many scenes in Bardo that I found brilliant. When he is chasing his wife around the apartment naked, like about to fuck, I was like giggling with
Mm.
them because it was like such a fun scene. When he's dancing to this like weird a cappella version of Let's Dance by David Bowie,
Yeah.
like
I love
I
that
found
scene.
that super evocative. Uh, Obviously the fragmentation and the blending of like surrealist imagery with real life, like the water in the train or the water in the apartment or the apartment room randomly being in the middle of a desert, or even the opening sequence where he's like jumping through the desert and he's levitating basically. Iñárritu seems to have a fascination with levitation. He does that a lot.
Mm.
uh, I don't know. I just found something evocative in almost every sequence. The conversation with his father in the bathroom at the party, uh, about taking a sip of success, swishing it around in your mouth, and spitting it back out again because it's poison. Like that, there's just so much brilliance in that movie. I thought I just, um, I loved it so much. I watched it with my mom once because she's Mexican, uh, and then I watched it one other time. I can't remember with who, but uh, it's it's become one of those movies that like if someone that I love hasn't seen it, I'll watch it with them, you know, because I love
Mm.
it.
I do have one question. Um, mostly because I don't speak Spanish. Or I mean, I only speak English in general. But are foreign kids just better child actors? Like, I don't know. I feel like
Wait, I thought
American.
that kid was so bad.
No, I'm talking about the kid that was in the bed, right? I thought that scene wasn't. I didn't mind that scene. Like as far as the teenager, like the teenage boy, I think his performance was whatever. But I think the kid that was in bed that he was talking to after the scene that John was talking about, where they're about to hook up.
Okay.
I thought that kid was pretty fine. You know, he was fine. But I also don't think I'd be able to tell the difference too much because I think so much of my attention is split when watching a film in another language between reading or trying to ingest more of the visual aspects of it. That as far as like audio, like the audio aspect of acting, I feel like that's mostly what I'm catching. I'm not catching as much physicality. So I mean, for a child actor, I thought it was all right. I thought he did okay. But I think American child actors are just fucking terrible. I think we got to stop hiring kids. It's just not worth it.
Wow. Okay, so Kwame is team fuck them kids.
Nah, I mean, I think that, hey, we don't know how to treat them on set anyway. Let's just cut our losses. Let's just stop hiring them.
John, I know that I told you that after I watched this movie, I was just so overwhelmed by the like symbolism of it all.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's just still where I am. I maybe I just need to watch it two more times like you have. Because I think I just scene to scene, I was just so focused on what does this mean that I wasn't actually kind of like following the central figure at the middle of that story that was surrounded by all that symbolism. Like I just didn't feel connected to him because I, as the viewer, was so like from the very first image, like what does this mean, or you
I
know,
don't I don't think that the images really were meant to mean much of anything, especially at the times in which he sort of goes into sort of these like kind of fugue states. It almost and that was kind of one thing that felt kind of weighty about it too, especially because of how meta the movie was. Because I mean, especially in a movie like that, you kind of like start to look for okay, so where are the ways in which the director is like trying to talk directly to me, right? It felt like, um, especially since this movie came after so many different movies set in America and almost like a reckoning as a director coming back home. These moments where he sort of goes into these other parts in his mind almost felt like escapism, right? And then his daughter even brings it up at the awards where she's like he probably almost brought this stroke onto himself in order to escape this, when in reality it almost kind of feels like that low key probably kind of feels like that could have been the case, right? Like it seems like he's avoiding so much in his life, but these obligatory moments when he is able to kind of leave is sort of where he kind of finds his strength a little bit. So it almost feels like these moments are more for him than they are for us.
well, and I mean maybe that is in some way like what the images are and the symbols are there to kind of represent, which is that if you are a person who creates objects as a way to make sense of your life, in this case it would be films, then like in some way everything around you becomes overwhelmingly symbolic at all times, and and you're not able to actually kind of like take in the people and the real, you know, non-symbol symbols that are just kind of there, looking for your attention and looking for your care. Um, and in that way, I do find it meaningful because I find myself feeling that way often, and that like I sometimes feel more connected to, um, the journey towards making something that I do, the people around me, or like the experience I'm actually having in the world.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and it almost becomes like a thing that kind of gives you strength, almost kind of yeah, it becomes a double-edged sword in that way. And it's one that
Well, that's I think beautifully expressed within the film several times, but
mhm.
you know, you see in the morning after he's chasing her around the home, and he and his son are sitting in the kitchen, and the hairdresser shows up to do the wife's hair, and then it starts raining outside, and he's talking with the son about being in Mexico, being Mexican, even though he has raised his children in Los Angeles because work took him to Los Angeles, and they ended up staying there. And the son is responding to the father's Spanish in English, and it becomes a problem for the father. And he tells his son, "Speak to me in Spanish." And the son is like, "Why? Like I was raised in America." And the father, right before he's interrupted by the wife returning to the kitchen, he's like, "Because we're in Mexico and we're Mexican." And then that in contrast with a scene that happens later in the airport when they're flying back into Los Angeles, and that, you know, TSA agent or customs agent equivalent is talking to them about how they're not American, and that same father who was fighting for his Mexicanness is now fighting for his Americanness because he, you know, he has the, I forget the qualification of the visa that he has, but, you know, he has the proper visa. He's been there for 15 years. He is American. And it's this, like, I don't know if it hit me so hard because of my proximity to Mexico or what, but, like, watching those characters in that way deal with the place that they belong to, the people that they belong to, I just found really evocative because, you know, everyone wants to belong in some sense. That's like a part of being a human, and you're watching this man, you know, prove to us throughout the film that he belongs to multiple places, and then you find out that something has happened to him that maybe makes you think that everything that you've just been watching has been his imagination or his memory or his projection on reality or whatever. You know, it's like, did he really belong to any of those places? Did any of this really happen? I don't know. I just found it really evocative.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that central like question for those characters is, I think, the thing that is the most like, that's the entry point in for, I think, an audience, is like, if you're both of these things, are you either of them fully? And if you're not either of them fully, are you any of them? Like, that's what it feels like to not feel like you belong anywhere. And I think that for me was like, that question throughout the whole film was very, I think, personal and vulnerable, and you know, not something that I can relate to directly, but this feeling of like, where do I fit, and does fitting in require that the people around me say that I fit in, or is it all on me to say that I fit in and therefore I do?
Yeah, and especially looking at Vortex and comparing it to this movie too, and when we're looking at the idea of what makes up a person, what makes up somebody's identity, so much of it is brought on from how other people perceive you, but so much of it is based off of your memories. And for Mother and Vortex, so much of her memories are non-existent. They're gone. Like, she has no way of even really attaching anything to him. But for our guy in Bardo, so much of his memories or even accounts of the events that we're watching are dramatized. We know they're dramatized, or they're what's the word? I mean, it's just a more flamboyant representation of the actual things that are taking place, and how people may not even really know about those, but about those parts that make up your identity. So is that really, are those parts even really part of you? If nobody's even, like, how much is what people perceive of you, your identity, versus how you perceive yourself, or the memories that you remember, or anything like that?
Yeah, and I mean also too, like the thing about like the subject of the film that he's making, this person who maybe was like a colonizer, if I understood that correctly, right? Like, in some way, that's kind of like the same struggle that the character in Ahed's Knee is dealing with, which is that, like, how critical of a place of your home can you be before you are on the side of the antagonizer?
Right.
And like you were just saying too as well, Kwame, like the whole thing is in some way about memory. And that you saying that made me think of this quote that I saw today from Tennessee Williams, where he was talking about how, like, our entire experience of life, save for the quite literally moment that has already passed now, is about living in your memory, in your memory, in your memory, in your memory.